Hi, I'm Adam Urinsky.
Hi, I'm Kim Yao,
Hi, I'm Stephen Cassell.
We're with the Architecture Research Office.
and you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guild. Modernist architecture makes special use of light and color. And with us today are some of those specialists: architect Wid Chapman, color expert Sara McLean, and musical guest and expert skater Laura Pursell. And now, here's your host who skates into the homes of colorful owners, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Thanks, Tom. In the 1960s, color came to television, and it was a big deal. TV was black and white from its start in the late 1940s for the next 20 or so years. Then, show after show advertised beautiful new color. And of course, you had to go out and buy a beautiful new color TV to see it. Sales boomed. I remember the moment I could see my favorite show, The Wild Wild West, in color. Star Robert Conrad played a Secret Service agent with his own train.
Yeah, that was cool.
Around 1870, battling steampunk bad guys like his archenemy, Dr. Miguelito Loveless. Conrad, who was about as tall as Tom Cruise, was made to appear taller, and he made out with every female guest star, as was the custom in those days. Captain Kirk, for example, with the green Orion girl and every remotely female guest star. What was the first color TV show you remember, Tom?
I think it was Get Smart, but I watched it in the lounge at the Atlantis Lodge in Emerald Isle, out on the beach.
A modernist hotel, I might add.
Yes,
Designed
it
by
was.
Don Stewart.
Yes, oh, a great place. My parents went there every summer because we only had black and white at home. My mom didn't want to get a color set of our own until after the Vietnam War was over. So it took a while. But every time we went to the Atlantis Lodge, the big deal, besides the beach, was watching color TV.
Well, we digress. Color did make a huge difference on TV, as it does in houses. The Neutra houses we love, for example, would just be gray boxes without strategic deployment of light and color. Otherwise, you're just living in a huge beige container, less like an icon and more like a storage unit. Luckily, modernist architects knew that light and color weren't just decorative afterthoughts. They were crucial to turning out vibrant, livable spaces. Big windows show off your Eames collection to the Ethan Allen neighbors next door, which was a plus, but more importantly, it flooded the interior with natural light. Color is a supporting actor to light's lead role. A strategically placed color wall amplifies the afternoon light, creating a cozy, inviting atmosphere. Avocado green, mustard yellow, burnt orange, all the colors we like to make fun of now, were carefully chosen to create warmth and optimism and remind you that life is more fun with a kitchen that looks like a 1950s orange juice commercial. That's where the magic happens, when a box becomes a home, a celebration of light, color, and the badly needed worldview, right now, of optimism. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
Wid Chapman, a New York-based architect known for innovative and vibrant designs, creates hospitality and educational spaces that emphasize the bold use of color and pattern. Projects like the restaurants Domica and Peachy Keen, known for their immersive sensory experiences. A former political science student, Wid was inspired by his parents, both architects, who worked with Walter Gropius and Joseph Albers. And he earned a degree at the Rhode Island School of Design.
Go Balls!
That's their mascot.
That's what we're told.
Okay. Well, here's George's conversation with Wid Chapman.
Wid, thanks for joining me.
Nice to be here, George. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
I have to ask, how did you get your name? Because I think your real name is William, right?
Yes. My mother, my mother did it. My mother knew a William called Wid. William's a hand-me-down name. I'm like
Okay.
William the something teenth or something. George William. So it's a middle name, in fact. And she didn't want me to be called Bill. And so she had a Wid in her past and named me Wid, and it stuck. So everyone's always called me Wid.
Are there a lot of Wids? I've not run into any except you.
Yeah, I've run into one other in my life, a Wid Washburn
Okay.
in DC years ago.
As we said in the introduction, you have specialized in restaurant design. So let me just start out with the basic question. What kind of restaurants do you like to go to the most? What kind of cuisines are your favorite?
You know, so much of my pick for restaurants, honestly, is based, whether I'm conscious of it or not, is what will the design be like?
The design nerd in you exceeds
I want to learn something while I eat. I actually am married to a foodie. My wife is a serious foodie.
Okay.
And so she's often picking places for their food, but she also knows that I'm particularly interested in design. So it really runs the gamut, just like the restaurants that we design run the gamut. So Indian food, Italian food, Spanish food. I love tapas.
Oh, me too. Yeah.
And there's just so many great. Korean food is really kind of coming up, Japanese food. So it really runs the gamut in New York.
So let's start at the low end. If you're going into, say, a fast food place or a restaurant vendor just on the street with a cart, are there design elements that these kind of places can do to improve the experience of the culinary masterpiece they're about to serve?
I think part of the appeal is that there is no design. And I think that, you know, that's the nature of street food.
Yeah.
I think is that it isn't meant to be anything but about the food, the authenticity of it, and the fact that they're brewing this up, they're cooking this up right on the street. So I think that's the charm of it. You know, having said that, we've designed a lot of Indian restaurants, and some of them have been inspired by street food. So I think in different parts of the world, in Thailand and India, I think that you can find a vibrant street food scene. And so there is kind of an aesthetic attraction to it. But in general, I would say you are going for the food, and that's the nature of it.
During the pandemic and since, did you get a chance to design any of these outdoor eating areas that popped up all over New York?
Yes, for, you know, all of the restaurants that we were doing in that period, it was sort of like an added aspect to the design scope was the outdoor restaurant. In fact, many of my clients were finding their sites based on whether there was going to be a hydrant nearby or not. Mm-hmm. Because if there was a hydrant in front of their place, they wouldn't be allowed to do outdoor seating.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And so it changed the whole nature of the restaurant site search for my clientele, because they had to have a place that had outdoor seating. So it was a very interesting period, the outdoor seating. At that time, a few years ago, I thought, I want to do a book on all these outdoor, you know, that really is interesting. It's not unlike the study of street food, right? Because it is dining out there on the street. But I think it was a fascinating phenomena from all sorts of perspectives: the aesthetic, the operational, the urban, the engagement of waiting staff, walking across the sidewalks, you know, into these ad hoc structures out on the street, you know, the cars whizzing by these structures, you know, much precariously close.
Very close. I almost got hit by a phone company van once sitting at lunch.
While you were dining.
Yes.
Yeah. Amazing. And then I still don't quite understand the legal ramifications. It's never gone into our filing drawings for the DOB drawings, which are to get a permit. It seems to be still outside of the jurisdiction of the Department of Buildings. So it's very interesting and obviously evolving. I think there are new regulations, but it's been fascinating, the outdoor dining and the structures.
And I believe at its peak, which was, around 2021, early 2022, there were thousands of these around New York.
And a lot of them are still there. I think the laws are changing. I think some of them are going to have to go, but a lot of them are still there. It's fascinating.
Tell me about engaging with a restaurant client. So when you're having those first couple of meetings, how do you assess the vibe that is going to be in this place once it gets going and start designing for that?
Well, it depends on the client. A lot of clients come with a very clear idea of their vision. Not that it ends up looking exactly like that when I'm done with it, but some clients come with very little. Some are first-time restaurateurs, some are 10-time restaurateurs, but it often comes from the cuisine itself. For some reason, we do a lot of Indian restaurants. We're really on a roll. We've probably done 25 of them.
Wow.
And we've got 3 on the boards right now. And we're prolific with Indian restaurants. So I've become quite nuanced about the vision or the discussion of the vision of an Indian restaurant. What region is it? Is it inspired by street food, or is it quite high end? Not so long ago, 2 years ago, did this restaurant Sema in New York that is a South Indian restaurant. It's a Michelin restaurant, by the way. It's a wonderful, in the village, wonderful food from the south of India. And the south is more tropical. And so we knew right away. So it almost feels a little more like Sri Lanka. And it has houseboats. And so some of the decor is inspired by being on the inside of a houseboat with a rattan ceiling. And it actually has angles to it. So it almost feels like you might be under deck. So a lot of it comes from the cuisine, and even more specifically, in this case, the region of India. But I would say that's the big starting point. And is it upscale, lower scale, and so on? And we go from there.
Are there any particular tricks or tweaks in terms of managing the diner's experience when they come in the front door for the first time? How do you manage that greeting moment in your designs for these restaurants?
Well, so much of it depends on how much space you have. I mean, in New York City, you can come in the front door and 10 things are happening while you're trying to check in with the staff. But in general, I'm a big believer in threshold. I really feel that there wants to be something special at the entrance, and that you're passing, that it has a wonderful sort of cleansing symbolism to leave the street of New York and pass through this threshold into this foyer. Hopefully there's room for something that is maybe not physically separated out like a foyer, but a place that you're feeling received. But I also think there's the long view. So you're being received by the host staff, but there's also the long view, and you're taking in the full experience of the restaurant as much as you can see from that front entrance. So I don't know that there are any tricks to it. And it really, again, depends on how much space you can even allocate to entry and foyer and host. But you certainly want to make people feel welcome and acknowledged, but also give them a sense of what's to come.
My wife heard you were going to be on the show, and she wanted me to ask you this question, and that is, how do you deal with noise in these restaurants? I've been to some great places where the food and the ambiance and the atmosphere was wonderful, but I couldn't hear somebody 18 inches from me.
It's interesting. You and I spoke a month or so ago, and I think I recounted to you an anecdote from Pete Wells, who just stepped down, a renowned food critic of the New York Times. He said to me recently that all the letters he gets from reviews, of all of them, 90% of them are about noise. And there are actually people complaining to him because you said this restaurant was great, but when I got there, I couldn't hear myself speak, or I couldn't hear my neighbor speak. And I have to say, I have had a lot of restaurant clients who like the din, who actually think it means that place is lively, and yes, you can't hear over it your own voice. But more and more, I must say, and I've got a couple of clients right now specifically sort of saying you have to find a way to absorb the sound.
Yeah.
And I think generally we're thinking about it, and we're thinking about it with upholstery. We're thinking about it with draperies. So the soft elements are absorbing the sound. There are tricks like putting a foam material under a table, because a lot of sound bounces off of the hard surface and gets absorbed under the table.
Oh, really?
Uh,
That's fascinating.
Yeah, we do that sometimes. And otherwise, if we don't mind or we have some interesting material that has sound absorbing qualities, like that rattan I mentioned at SEMA, that certainly absorbs sound. And any texture or grooves, even if they're not specifically sound absorbing materials, that gathers some of the sound waves and dissipates them. So it's interesting. Sometimes it's a real kind of conscious issue. Generally, we know that the upholstery, we like to do a lot of upholstery, long linear banquettes or round banquettes, upholstered chairs. We know that that's going to go a long way to absorbing sound. Wood is better than tile. So we know if we're doing a tile floor, we probably have to do something to mitigate it.
Sure.
That's true of a big steakhouse we're doing in Rockefeller Plaza right now in New York, where we're doing a lot of tile. And the client has specifically said, we're really concerned about the noise from the tile. You have to find us ways to mitigate the sound. And we're working on that now.
Now, you have been genetically predispositioned to architecture, I understand. Both your parents were architects and worked with Gropius and Joseph Albers. What kind of projects did they do?
Well, my mother, as you say, my mother and father met at the Architects Collaborative called TAC, which was a renowned firm in Cambridge, Mass. At the time. My mother had studied with the renowned color theorist from the Bauhaus, Joseph Albers, at Yale. And then she had done a year abroad in Europe. And at the end of that time, it was an incredible time at Yale, Louis Kahn came to guest critique, Stuart Davis, Alexander Calder. Those were guest critics for Joseph Albers. And I think it was a comment that Lou Kahn made at one of the reviews. He really liked the way she was using color in space. I don't know what the project was, but it gave her the inspiration to apply to Gropius's office, the Architects Collaborative, after she returned from Europe, to be a color consultant. She got obviously a great letter from Albers, and obviously they were both at the Bauhaus together, Walter Gropius, who they called Grope, and Joseph Albers. So she became the in-house color consultant. And she did big public murals in libraries and schools and hospitals. There were big colorful tile murals and enameled paneled murals. And then my father had studied nearby at Harvard, and Gropius was no longer the chair of the department at Harvard. Sert was at the time, Jose Luis Sert. And Gropius asked him to come join him at the Architects Collaborative. And so my parents met there. My father was a young associate, and my mother was Gropius's color consultant. She was a color theorist, a painter, went on afterwards to work at Perkins and Will in New York, while my father worked for Breuer.
So it's inevitable that you're going to end up being an architect here.
Well, it's interesting because I have two older sisters who are architects. And I think
See,
for them,
there we go.
I think for them, it was inevitable. But I had actually other plans. It was studying painting and fiction writing and thought about international relations. And actually, it was when I spent 2 years at a very liberal arts school in Western Massachusetts, knew I wanted to transfer out, was going to study for a semester in France. And on the way to the airport, I literally was filling out my transfer application to Rhode Island School of Design and checked off architecture. This sounds pretty random, right? But I checked off architecture, and lo and behold, I learned while I was in France that I'd been accepted into the architecture program. And I had a strong art portfolio, so that's what got me in. That summer, I was either going to go to the Sorbonne and study political science and international relations, or go to RISD. And so you would think it's inevitable that I was going to be an architect, but it almost feels like it's from checking off the box architecture on the RISD application on the way to the airport. And I think my mother finished sending in the application that I ended up making that decision. I never looked back. But for my sisters who were practicing architects, it was much more felt like it was inevitable early on. They took mechanical drafting in high school and all of that.
Are they still practicing?
They are, yeah. One is in New York, one is up in Maine. The one in New York, we did try practicing together a while ago. That's a whole new conversation.
Okay.
but we're close. Yeah.
So you have certainly color in your family background, and you're known for some of your use of color in these restaurants. So how does that come together, both in terms of the colors and the different textures that you choose for these?
Well, in general, I see color and material as sort of interchangeable. And I teach at Parsons, and I have for a long time. And the way I teach there, it's a very spatial discipline. Same thing in my office. We're creating interesting spaces, hopefully with kind of a strong concept, a strong integrity. Nothing is kind of random. It's both functional, but also aesthetically pleasing. And these different spatial experiences and sequences for, in this case, the restaurant goer. And where you and how you apply material and color, in my mind, needs to support what you've done spatially or architecturally. And so where color or material goes, or is this a special color or material versus that wall, which wants to be something different, is very much for me part of the spatial concept. So my point is, I never want it to be random. It really is meant to support the way the spaces are made and shaped. Now, some walls want to be feature walls.
Right.
They want to be accent walls. You want them to sort of stand out somehow, whether they're in a position at the end of the restaurant and you want to draw the eye to the end, or a back of bar is a good example where you want to make a feature out of that entire wall. And it's obviously got functionalities of bottle storage and all that as well. But generally speaking, I try to have something deeper that's guiding me for both material selection and allocation and color selection.
Is there any restaurant tech that's come along in recent years that has changed the way restaurants perform day to day?
Well, I think restaurants, and actually surprising number of high-end restaurants, have a takeout business. I think COVID, changed a lot. And we were talking about the entry experience before. Now the other person that you're competing with, that the customer's competing with when they come into the entrance, is the Uber delivery person.
Yes.
So the takeout business, I see that as technological. It's seamless, the app seamless, and Uber Eats and all that. But in terms of accommodating that in a restaurant, it's generally better accommodated in the fast casual restaurants that we do. We're very much designing in the places where the takeout is grabbed without any interaction at all, slightly out of the way of the customer interacting with the staff and ordering and waiting themselves. So I think that's affected almost every restaurant. I think the most high end of restaurants, maybe they didn't even do that much takeout before. I think since COVID, they are.
So I know you've done a lot of restaurants. I was able to find one called Damaka. Is that how you say it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Peachy Keen. Can you reel off some other restaurants so people can go out there and experience these on their own and see your work?
Sure. One of the early Indian restaurants that we did, it's about 15 years ago or so, is called Tamarind Tribeca. It's very large. It's got 2 floors. It's very upscale tablecloths. It's sort of old school, but it's a very modern environment. And even today, I love going in there. It was conceived in a way that I like to conceive any restaurant of any size, which is almost as an urban planner, where there's the main town square and the mezzanine overlooks that town square, where the church or the mayor's office might be. There's a tandoor chef cooking behind a glass enclosure, so right at the end of the sort of the axis. So it's a wonderful restaurant, Tamarind, that I highly recommend. Sema, I mentioned before, the South Indian restaurant. Industry Kitchen is a really kind of fun, vibrant restaurant down near South Street Seaport, right on the edge of the water. It's right underneath the FDR Drive, literally under it, and hence the name Industry Kitchen. A fun takeout is called Rowdy Rooster. We've done 2 of those. It's a fried chicken concept. There's one across from Penn Station and one down in the East Village. Nax is a Filipino restaurant in the village, in the East Village, that we finished about a year ago. And right now we're working on a very large steakhouse working name is The Establishment. That should be open in about 8 or 9 months, right next to Rockefeller Center in related building 75 Rock Plaza. So that's one to look out for. That's exciting. We have another Indian restaurant about to open in 2 months. And Serendipity, of course, Serendipity, which is that Andy Warhol inspired ice cream parlor gone crazy in Times Square.
Okay.
Super, talk about color, super, super colorful. So many of your listeners who come to New York, if they have kids, they might have gone to Serendipity 3, which was on the Upper East Side. Andy Warhol used to be a frequent guest. This is 30 years ago. It became known for its affiliation with Warhol. And so we just a couple of months ago finished one in Times Square that is all about Andy Warhol. And Andy Warhol designed loads of wallpaper, obviously inspired by his pop art. And it's over the top.
Well, next time when I'm in New York and want some buttered chicken or some ice cream, I know where to go.
Let's do it.
Wid, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure, George.
That was George talking with Wid Chapman.
Sara McLean explores color theory and its applications to design, art, and interiors, diving into the psychology, symbolism, and emotional resonance of colors, providing readers with practical insights on how different hues can transform spaces and evoke specific moods. Her 2 books, Chromatic Chronicles and Seasonal Color Reflections, came out in 2024 and are available at bookstores near you. She is formerly with the Dunn Edwards Paints, but she now runs her own firm, Indigo and Honeycomb Color Lab, helping clients connect with color. She also is the creative color consultant for Messiah, a men's clothing store in Long Beach, an interior designer with West Elm, and a visual merchandiser with Anthropology. That is a lot of gigs. Welcome, Sara.
Thank you so much for having me, George. It's good to see you again.
Absolutely. Sara's coming back to the show. We talked with her last at the Hotel Skylark during Modernism Week, one of these years, and we're just impressed with how you were speaking about color and making it very understandable. For a lot of the population, I'll say all the men, we just don't quite get it the same way that women get it naturally, right? I mean, we know black and brown and green maybe, but the expression of those other colors, different story. So how do you go about educating the men in the world to be able to understand color, just for my own education?
Really, what I start with is the basics. I try to employ teaching methods, basic teaching methods that I would for a child to an adult, and walk them through the process of the color basics, starting with red, the Roy G. Biv, what is it actually? What is a hue? And then breaking out from there. What are your likes and dislikes? And then
wasn't that from Dr. Seuss? Horton, here's a hue.
Exactly. Go to Dr. Seuss for anything and you're fine. But it is going back to those basics. And then also color tells a story, and I love telling stories. I like to make sure people remember those stories, men and women, and it helps to create a picture in your mind to be able to then take the story of a particular color, and then I expand on that into a full palette. And then how can we direct it into an application? Inspiration to application, I always say. And how can I help you enjoy what you may not fully understand, because color is such an abstract thought, but I want you to enjoy it. Even if you don't understand color, if you just I just want the black and white basics, or I want basic neutrals. I try and push just a little bit. Let's have you test out a color. It could be the greens, which are just trending so much in popularity this year. What type of green do you like? And we're just trying to push you just a little bit. I'm not going to overwhelm you at all. I could go on forever with color, but I try to give smaller tidbits of information to help out somebody who's just not as confident with color, but get them to a place where that next decision on color you'll feel pretty good about.
Now, you come from a family of artists who've been into all kinds of art forms. Swedish rosmaling. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, rosemalling, and it's a traditional Swedish painting technique. Just a beautiful traditional folk art painting technique. My mom, who has taught art, is actually really into watercolors lately, all kinds of craft work over time. My father spent his career as a carpenter and construction industry. So really the construction trades and artistic trades have been in my blood. So it's run long through me. So I hope to continue that effort because I really enjoy it. It's part of who I am.
In your book, The Chromatic Chronicles, you actually try to tell the story of, I guess, 11 colors. So you've got red, pink, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, brown, gray, white, and black. And I noticed you started with the red like you did earlier. Is that kind of the easiest color for people to begin with?
It just seems to be the beginning of every color point that exists in a conversation. And for me, I'll either start with the neutrals as a storytelling point and then work my way through to end to red, or begin a story with red. And it just seems to be, for me, red is just such a hot point, just a beginning marker, that I felt just a comfort just starting there because it just has a strong connection with me. It's not necessarily my favorite color, but I do love all shades of red. So I enjoyed starting with at that point and really what those shades meant to me.
Is there any relationship between people's color preferences and what they wear?
There is. People will find, even innately, that you are drawn to certain colors, and you look in your closet and your wardrobe, you're going to find that a predominant section of your wardrobe is what you love to wear. You feel more confident wearing certain colors, so you're naturally drawn to them, whether you think about it or not. And so if you're a person who loves more neutrals, you're probably going to find your wardrobe innately more of the warm neutrals to grays, blacks, creams, whites, navies. I, of course, am drawn to color, so my wardrobe is quite colorful. I'm not really afraid of a lot of colors, so I like to experiment. It's definitely a maximalist push towards pattern and color and mixing and matching. I really enjoy that. So you would see that in my wardrobe, and again, that helps me, I guess, tell who I am. You know, everybody, as you dress, how you want to, I guess, on a certain day or through work or going about your day, whatever you wear tends to showcase a bit of your personality. And so that's what I like to help out with. And that's how you would see me on a day-to-day basis.
Well, let's switch over to architecture. I've always wondered why people build buildings and just fill them with these kind of off-white, low-rate gray colors. There's just no real color, what I think of red, blues, greens, anywhere. When the paint costs about the same, why aren't they choosing color?
There is an innate fear of color and really not wanting to, I guess, fall into any what they think of as trend at any point in time and want it to just float into the background. If it's an architecturally significant building, I know many architects will fall into that area of just focusing on the architecture itself. Color is definitely secondary or tertiary to what their story of architecture is trying to get across. But general office buildings that, whether it's tilt-ups or just, your typical office spaces, the blandness that shows through is really just so, part of it so the tenant can maybe add a little spark of touch to it, or they just don't think about it. That color can really help out with the employee psyche, can excite a visitor and really bring them into what is the personality of that business going into? You don't see that a lot. And I think just it's that innate fear. People believe it costs more to showcase unique color palettes, and it doesn't really. You don't have to do too much, like you said, just paint here or just a unique art piece that just adds a little layer, but they just go down that path of the bland list, like you said, and it just isn't something they think about. So I hope that, one of my goals over time has always been to just push it a little bit. And then outside of my past at a paint company, now that I'm doing more interior design work and more visual merchandising, it's just taking that story and pushing it forward and hoping that through more retail and office projects that I can push a building owner or an architect to just consider certain choices that are a little more colorful than bland and get them to that next point.
What are some examples of buildings that either you or others have done that made excellent use of color?
Some of my favorites are always restaurants. I find that restaurant architects, restaurant designers have a real fun, I guess, more playful side to the use of color in their palettes, because it is a space where you want to create a really strong aesthetic and tie it into the cuisine that you're serving. And so I find that these places really have some fun with it. One of my favorites, and we talked earlier about Palm Springs and Modernism Week, is the Parker Hotel. And Mr. Parker's restaurant is just that space just has a beautiful palette to work with. I think many places there, because it's such a unique space in California, you'll find many of those restaurants have such a fun quality and color personality. A lot of the hotels there as well. I find that some of the spaces in Los Angeles, I'm trying to think of one in particular, but they tend to have some funner spaces as well. Coffee shops also exude a wide range of personalities. Outside of your corporate entities like Starbucks or Coffee Bean, these smaller coffee houses that really want to create a personal community touch tend to push the boundaries a bit more and have more fun with it and are just more playful artistically. So those are the spaces that I look to. I can't think of any office buildings off the top of my head that have really struck me and that I have done that would say, very colorful, very fun space. It's really been more of these retail, restaurant, coffee shop spaces that they're willing to push the boundaries a bit and showcase the unique qualities of who they are in these businesses.
I know that a lot of offices for co-working have tried to become like coffee houses and use color and texture all the time. WeWork, which is not as big as it used to be, you would go into their communal area and it was just as good as any Starbucks decor.
Absolutely. And these temporary spaces, these co-work spaces, part of it is to bring people in and act as a community. I find that a lot of these spaces too focus on, I guess, different generational segments. So whether it's Gen Z or Gen Alpha, in the younger millennial crowd, they're not as afraid of color. They're bolder with their choices, both in fashion and design, and have really taken that idea of color as a personality touch. And spaces such as WeWork have committed to them as a focus point and bringing them in, knowing full well that they need to create something fun and unique. The general bland office space isn't going to necessarily work for the younger generations anymore. Now, traditional office spaces, you're probably going to always find the basic neutrals, but I think more and more, depending on if you're trying to attract different generations, you're going to need to do something to create some form of personality to attract it.
Right. It has to be more than lattes and M&Ms.
It certainly does. It absolutely does. And beyond the palette itself and the architecture and design, of course, it's the people behind it, but it is a good base setting to bring people in and create a wonderful first impression. And it just doesn't have to cost that much. It's just most businesses aren't used to it. But certainly it's something to consider if you want to stay in business long term and keep people coming through your doors.
Sara's new books are The Chromatic Chronicles and Seasonal Color Reflections. Thanks for talking with me again, Sara.
Thank you so much, George. It's been wonderful to talk with you, and look forward to it again.
That was George with Sara McLean. Returning podcast guest, singer Laura Pursell is by day an award-winning ice skating coach with the Scott Hamilton Skating Academy. Growing up in Nashville, she was surrounded by music, which led to a remarkable 20-year collaboration with her father, the great Bill Pursell. She created the one-woman show, The Pope of Jocelyn Hollow, and her latest album, Shooting Star, blends Americana, country, and Southern rock. Here's George's conversation with Laura Pursell.
Laura, tell me what you've been doing since we've talked to you last. I understand that you have a ritual now in the mornings with a certain kind of breakfast to get you ready to go. What are you eating these days?
I get a piece of bread, I toast it, I spread some organic peanut butter or almond butter. Actually, almond butter is better. Almond butter on top of the toast. Then I slice up some bananas. I stack the bananas on top of the peanut butter. And with my cup of coffee, that is my breakfast of champions. And then I'm out the door.
And where are you heading off to? Tell us.
I am heading off to the ice rink. 6:15 a.m. class. I teach artistry movement on ice to a few adults. And they are dedicated. You know what? I wouldn't, if I didn't have to get up and teach it, I wouldn't do it, but they do it. They get up and they get laced up, they get their skates on, they do this class, and then they go to work. I call that dedication, wanting to exercise before you hit the office.
Well, you're in that rare category of expert figure skaters / musicians.
Yes, I'm a unicorn.
Which is great.
It's a little crazy.
Is it possible to sing and skate at the same time? Have you tried that?
You are only the 25th person who's asked me that. I have never actually tried that. Now, if there was a way to mic me up, because I spin and I jump, right? So I guess it could be done. People dance and sing all the time. I guess they could. But now jumping and spinning, that's a tall order.
There's this whole new technology, Laura, called wireless. I don't know if you've heard about it, but I think they can do that now.
You think so?
Yeah.
I'd have to have something near my body to, you know what I mean? I'd have to sing into something.
Right. You'd have to have one of those little tiny microphones that comes out, that hooks on your ear, right?
Yeah.
And then you'll be wearing the little backpack that attaches to your waist. So you can spin and jump and do all you want. It'll stay right with you.
I could try it, but usually it's interesting because you breathe differently when you're singing than you do when you're on the ice. When you're on the ice, everything is up in your chest. It's like, and okay, here I go. I'm going into my camel spin. I'm going into my axle.
Yeah.
But when you sing, it's from your diaphragm. It's a totally different breathing. So I might sound a little frantic vocally if I were to sing and skate at the same time. I'm willing to try.
You should try. You could maybe time the jumps with some sort of moment in the tune, right? Because dancers on TV, we see them orchestrating their movement to what's happening in the music, right?
You may be onto something.
I think so. Tell us about this first song, The Very Last Dance Hall in L.A.
Oh, The Very Last Dance Hall Left in L.A. is a song that I wrote about my experiences singing at a dance hall in Los Angeles. It was about a couple named Roger and Mary. Roger and Mary were this elderly, beautiful, married for decades, beautiful couple.
Aren't they the parents of Jack and Diane? I think another one of those famous couples.
They could be. Kind of doubt it, but they could be. They could be. The more elegant. Yeah. These were elegant people. They dressed up. She had on a dress and she had her hair in this beautiful silver bun. And I think he was a retired doctor, surgeon or something. and he would wear a suit. I would get up on stage and I would sing to tracks. It was almost like a glorified karaoke, but they were tracks with symphonic orchestral arrangements, and people would come and they would dance. They would do the foxtrot, the tango, all those ballroom dances are, and I would sing. And Roger and Mary were there every Friday night religiously. And I added a character named Paul. His wife had passed away. He was very lonely, but he would come to the dance hall and watch Roger and Mary dance. And Roger, after his first dance with his lovely wife, he would take a seat and Mary would go over to Paul and ask him to dance.
Ah, nice.
So Mary, would dance with both of them. And eventually they all passed away and the dance hall closed. And that was the end of it. It was called San Gennaro. And I wrote these lyrics and I tossed them around for years. And I always envisioned it as a ballad. But then my dad got a hold of it and made it something else completely. He gave it this kind of rumba funk beat, and it became this very up-tempo, exciting track, which just goes to show when you collaborate with somebody, you have to just let it go, just see where it wants to go and breathe. And it became a completely different animal than what it was when I wrote the song.
Here's Laura with the very last dance hall left in L.A.
Now Roger and Mary are dancing away in the very last dance hall left in L.A. He tells her he loves her with each single line. The world disappears, the moon starts to shine. Where time stops forever and love finds a way. In that very last dance hall left in L.A. Now Paul sits alone on the edge of the floor where he sat with his wife 2 years before. And I sing to her memory so he's not alone. And the piano man plays and the music moves on. About lovers, about friends, about time. And I sing about heartbreak with each single line. Paul stares at the dancers, recalling romance. And then Mary walks over and asks him to dance. Where time stops forever, love finds a way. In that very last dance hall left in L.A. And just for a moment, I'm suspended in time. With Roger and Mary, the music is mine. I dance in my head, the piano man plays in the very last dance hall left in L.A. 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 Left in L.A.
I like that song so much, Laura.
Thank you. I do too. We got into the studio and I was like, Dad, what did you do? What is this beat? This is such a strange beat. I don't even know what you call it. Is it funk? Is it rumba? Is it Latin? I don't know what it is. It's a mixture of all kinds of things. But Dad was that way. He would just create genres. So we had to make it the title track, of course.
Are you playing anywhere in 2025?
I am playing with a band called Jazzberry Hill. These are new jazz standards written by my dear friend Margie Foreman. She's a wonderful, wonderful lyricist and songwriter. I heard her at the Nashville Jazz Workshop. I heard her testing out her songs, and I said, would you allow me to play around with these? I think I could perform them. And she said, oh my God, are you kidding? That's great. So we put together a show of her songs. We did a bunch of shows back in the summer of 2024 and a couple of shows in December of 2024. And we will be continuing that throughout 2025. And of course, I'm working on my own project. I'm putting together a show about the golden years of the Nashville sound in the 1960s and 70s.
Yeah.
I'm very excited about this. And I have so many stories from my dad in the studio, all the people he worked with, Johnny Cash, Chet Atkins, Patsy Cline, Brenda Lee, all of these people. And I'm going to weave that into my show. And I'm going to bring back some of those chestnuts.
Brenda Lee's been on our show. She's still around.
Unbelievable. Only 13 when she started working.
13 years old when she started.
Yeah.
Did you know that the Beatles used to open for her?
What?
Yes. In the early days, the Beatles opened for Brenda Lee.
A 13-year-old.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That's crazy.
Where did the Beatles open up for Brenda Lee?
I don't remember that exactly, but I researched that when we interviewed Brenda, and she did remember it, yes.
Well, the next time you talk to Brenda, ask her about my dad. Ask her about Bill Pursell.
Okay, I sure will.
Yeah, she was quite a bit younger than Dad was at the time.
Tell us about this next song, Somewhere in This Room.
Okay, that's a song that I wrote a few years ago, several years ago. I loved the title. Here's how this happened. I had lost my car keys. I couldn't find them. And my friend Sherry Pedigo was with me. I said, oh, I can't find my car keys. I know they are somewhere in this room. She said, oh, that's a great song title. You're right. And I wrote it down. So I kind of stole the title from her. Hopefully she doesn't remember that. And I finally wrote a song about it with my collaborator, Andrew Boneem produced that album. It was the title track for an album called Somewhere in This Room. He had written this melody, and I took my title and I created the lyrics to his melody. And he loved it. We worked on it for weeks, fine-tuning every word. We wanted this to be an absolute masterpiece lyrically. And he was so proud of the song. I think of Andy often. He passed away a few years ago, and he wasn't that old. He was in his 60s. He might have been close to 70. But this was his baby. And every time I hear this song, I think of Andy.
Somewhere in this room, a promise fills the air. You can't hear it now, it's there, believe me. Somewhere in this room, somewhere in your eyes, there's a soul I knew. I can't see it now, but I just know it. Somewhere in your eyes. Maybe if we wait, maybe if we're very still, maybe we can feel enchanted sunshine as it warms your heart, there's still a place for me. If we can forget, let's let it go now. Somewhere in your heart, this is all we are. Careless pride and aging scars, clumsy arrows falling short of targets in the blindness of the dark. Somewhere in your heart, there's still a place for me. If we can forget, let's let it go now. Somewhere in your heart. Somewhere in this room, you said you loved me too, and I still believe you never left me. Somewhere in this room.
Attention cruise ship directors, Laura is available to come on your boat and play. Isn't that right, Laura?
I would love nothing more than to get on a cruise ship. Do you know I've never been on a cruise ship?
Well, you might as well go right at the top and come in as a performer.
I was hired to do Crystal Cruises. This was years ago. I was with the band. It was Gary Toll's orchestra, and it was a big deal.
Yeah.
And we were set to leave, and then the SARS virus happened. Do you remember SARS?
Oh, SARS. Yeah, sure.
Long time ago, and they beached all the boats. They brought them all back.
Canceled. Yeah.
They canceled. So I lost the gig, and that was my one big shot to be a real superstar on this awesome cruise ship. And I never got to do it again. And I thought, well, I don't want to pay to go on a cruise ship when I could go and sing. I would rather perform. I'd rather go and perform and then experience it that way. So yes, please hire me. I'm available.
The cruise ship industry is just booming right now. So I think your odds are pretty good.
I would love that. Let's make that a plan for this year.
Laura, thanks so much for coming back on the show.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. It's always so fun to talk to you, George.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs. Okay, Tom, take us out.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 23,000 significant modernist houses, and access 4.5 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song is performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl, with guest research by Bobby Morris. Timely is her middle name, or it could be Theodora. We really don't know. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guile. George and I'll be back soon with another colorful, light-filled Green Orion Girl edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.
Live long and prosper, my friend.